the working class right now has the leverage of its labor. In other words, the value of labor means that when there is an oppressive situation relative to capital or the ruling class, they can go on a general strike. They can stop the productivity of capital because they can leverage their labor to disturb the flow of capital. If labor is made obsolete, what is the leverage that the worker has to challenge capital or the ruling class to actually find a way to fulfill its needs? Does that mean that we have reduced workers to some type of radical, more extreme types of protests, destroying private property, more radical revolutionary activity? What does this mean? Or are we actually moving to a situation where we have to find a more creative way to demand reform or concessions from the state if we're interested in that? What is more disturbing to me is that I don't particularly see too many voices on the left really discussing this seriously, because everyone is still talking about workers, labor, the working class from this kind of abstract position. I know we all like $15 minimum wage. We like $15 minimum wage, but what you realize that capital is going to use the argument of $15 minimum wage as a means to say, well, this is exactly why we decided to do automation, which we know is a lie, because capital would move to automation anyway because it cuts down labor costs, which is one of the most premier goals of capital in terms of increasing profitability. So the larger question becomes to me is that how exactly does a labor becoming rendered obsolete use any means to leverage on the state and capital to make demands for a humane quality of life in this particular stage of capitalism in the United States? And what is frustrating to me is that many of the voices on the left are stuck in this kind of antiquated notion, and it's ridiculous that someone like Andrew Yang who is not a leftist, he's basically corporate funded I think he's kind of a neoliberal, is considered to be the golden boy with the answers to the question.
Well, isn't that kind of the case with a lot of the tech gajillionaires, that they always are supposed to have the answers to all these questions? If it's not Andrew Yang, it's Elon Musk. If it's not Elon Musk, it's Jack Dorsey. If it's not Jack Dorsey, then it's Mark Zuckerberg, right? Isn't someone always looking to them for the Bill Gates?
Well,
is kind of the king of that, right?
The question that we need to ask if we purport to be members of the quote unquote left is that why are we surrendering the answers of solutions to Americans' social problems to the capitalist exploiter class that is doing nothing but marginalizing labor in the first place?
Do you think that it's us surrendering to these people, or do you think that it's people are getting more taken up into issues like, I can't remember if it was you and me on a show that we were doing, if it was on this show or another show you and I were doing, where you mentioned why you don't follow certain things like police killings. And you actually had an interesting point. You're like, I think that what did you say exactly? You said,
I said, in terms of what aspect are you talking about regarding?
Like, why don't you follow the latest?
I said because I'm not going to have myself be socially engineered into believing I'm sorry, being into socially engineered into believing I'm a second class citizen by having myself, my emotions corralled into a media spectacle.
And it also changes a conversation that we could be having about things like the redundancy of labor, which is a big reason why deindustrialization, which is a big reason why you have over policing in these formerly industrialized areas. And instead you're talking about how we can have nicer police, right?
Yeah. Someone said it's a form of social control. Exactly. I don't want to be rendered to a form of social control that allows my emotions to be triggered under a racial categorization of second class citizenship.
So I would say it's less of people letting the Yangs of the world take over that conversation and more of, I think people feel there is something to be said about watching this brutality on TV, right? And when you see that level of brutality, triggers an emotional response.
Well, I want to say something to this. Remember, as our audience knows, one of my persistent theories on this show is about black politics as a politics of containment,
Yes.
in that it forces a kind of illusory collective response to phenomenon in that is managed by a black political managerial class that basically submits its actual needs to that of the ruling class at the behest of the ruling class under the charade of racial unity or racial affinity for the black working class and proletariat. And what I'm saying is that watching this George Chauvin thing and all these police murders is a way of self-containing yourself as a black person. Look at all the black people are happy. All the black people are sad. All the black people are going to riot. So actually, your emotional connection to the visual imagery of these phenomenon is rendering you into one collective vessel that is being managed by the state and the ruling class, because you are surrendering to a certain form of social control and programming that says that because you are black, you must feel XYZ button about this issue. And we predict that. And that's why we're dispatching Nancy Pelosi and XYZ person to say, oh, George Floyd sacrificed his life.
That may go down in history as maybe one of the worst things politicians said after an event like this, maybe.